You are listening to the U.S. of N.A. by Nation Beer, a series of stories about the people and places from every corner of the country who are helping fuel the N.A. beer movement. If you like this episode, please add us to your library in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen. For more great N.A. stories, including our many beer reviews, visit nationbeer.com. Are you a non-alcoholic beverage brand looking for help with growth? Then go to nation.beer to learn more about our digital marketing services. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I'm your host, John Eggleton, Chief Hoptimist for Nation Beer. Today's conversation is with Lars Dahlhaus, who I'll be introducing more formally here in a moment. He's the co-founder of Momentum Brewery, as well as ProofNoMore. And we had wanted to get Lars's perspective on a few things. First and foremost, he has worked in the beer and beverage industry for quite a few years now. And as we're trying to get different perspectives on NA from people around the category, or not necessarily even in the category, we wanted to get his insights from someone who has worked in beer for quite some time. Momentum just launched last December, so the brand itself is in its first 6 months of existence. Lars definitely had a lot of interesting points to make. In our conversation, he talks about some of the differences between the German and U.S. markets and how that might impact what sort of numbers NA beer might reach here. We also wanted to hear his thoughts on branding and packaging. If you've seen Momentum's 2 NA beers yet, you'll know the IPA comes in a sleek, thin, dark can, while the Golden comes in a traditional, brighter colored one. He talks about those choices and how they wanted to focus on the place of consumption. Personally, I think as people continue to evaluate when and where to drink non-alcoholic beverages, it's a really smart way to think about the category from the perspective of the consumer. Lastly, we finished our conversation with a discussion about smaller local breweries, and Lars talks about wanting to partner with some of them to help them offer an NA beer in their tap rooms, which, when you think of it, could be part of a broader opportunity for NA-only breweries to grow and extend their own reach. Anyways, thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy the interview. All right. So Lars Dahlhaus is the co-founder of Momentum Brewery. They're a non-alcoholic brewery based in Brooklyn, New York. He's also a co-owner of ProofNoMore, which is a leading e-commerce site and the rapidly growing non-alcoholic beverage marketplace. He's got a long history of experiences in beer and adult beverages prior to that. So Lars, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with your background a little bit. So you've had a pretty long career in the beverage space. I don't want to date anybody, but we've both, I guess we've both been around for a little while, and you've been around a long time in the beer space, both here as well as in Germany. Can you give us a background on how you first got into beer and, what brought you into the NA category? What got you interested in it?
Yeah. I'm originally from Germany, as you will soon hear from my accent, but I've been here 26 years. And in 2003, had a connection with an old school friend of mine in Germany who became the president of our local brewery there in a town called Schwelm. And we pretty quickly decided, let's just import that beer to the U.S. because that's what I was missing most at that time. And we made it happen and had a really good run with it for 6-7 years. Established a completely unknown beer brand here in the US, pretty much prior and getting into the craft beer revolution here. Built distribution in 24 states, and we were pretty successful until the brewery, unfortunately, wasn't as successful in Germany. And but then I stuck around in the beer world. Started working for St. Killian, which up until recently was one of the largest beer import companies in the U.S. and helped them with their German portfolio and some of the international brands. Helped launch Crabbie's alcoholic ginger beer, which was a lot of fun. Brought over Rothaus, Andex, some really amazing craft breweries from Germany. Then went out on my own. Did a lot of consulting, helped other brands, which I still continued to do. I still help breweries figure out if the US is a place to go to or not. And often these days, my recommendation is no, because the universe has changed in that regard. It's really difficult. But that's a different topic for another day. And then I would say I've been curious about NA for now probably 10 years. Growing up in Germany, even in the 80s, you would see Klaus Thaler coming up, becoming popular and successful. But my 5 cents with that is really it has been and continues to be a necessity for German brewers to have a non-alcoholic option. It's not like it is here in the U.S. Something people seek out from a taste point of view and from an experience point of view. That's a complete different scenario, and that was just there again, and it continues to be the same thing. Out of the 1,500 German breweries, probably 1,200 make a non-alcoholic product, but not because they want to, because they have to.
Right, right.
I had plans to launch my own NA brewery 7 years ago, but nobody would believe me then. I tried something with a partner 2-3 years ago that didn't work out for me. Found yet another good friend and former business partner and now business partner, Wolfgang, who trusts me that we're on the right path with Momentum, and we're happy to find a great brewery in Great South Bay on Long Island, who came in as a partner as well, to get Momentum Brewing into cans. And speaking of brewing, our brewmaster Alex from Germany, he helped develop those recipes. I'm very, very happy with it. We actually canned yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Yeah, so could you talk a little bit about, I guess, how the model works then? So you have your own brewer, but you also have a
Mm-hmm.
brewery partner. So is
Mm-hmm.
he on site then when the beer is being
Yeah,
made, or I guess what does that relationship look like with, with the partner?
yeah. It's extremely collaborative. The team there at Great South Bay is amazing, and as I said, they are business partners. So we're in it together. We're not playing contract brewing or anything like that. Alex is actively involved, making sure the recipe is followed and improvising where needs to be improvised. It is craft brewing at the end. A lot of things can happen along the way. And Alex has 6-7 years experience in making non-alcoholic beers in Germany. So, I knew that A, he's a great guy, and B, he knows exactly how this works without expensive equipment like the de-alc machines or renting a de-alc machine and all this stuff I never wanted to do.
So
Mm-hmm.
your first two were a golden and an IPA, and I know there's a
Mm-hmm.
Kolsch that's on the way, which we'll come back to that
Yeah.
in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly two of the most popular styles, not just in craft beer, but in NA specifically. I
Yeah.
think golden and IPA. Was there a
Mm-hmm.
specific reason you wanted to start with those styles, or was that just sort of where the path led you, or just
Realistically, IPAs and pale ales are still where the craft beer industry is. And the last thing I wanted to do is to do a Pilsner, really, because it's just too commercialized with Heineken's and all the big guys from Europe. Why do that, right? It's not even really doable the way we brew to make that very, very typical Euro Pilsner flavor. So wasn't even a target of ours because we think people want to have a real full taste and want to have an exploration when they try a product like this. So a Kölsch is close to my heart. I grew up an hour away from Cologne. Love the beer style. Very familiar with it. Alex is very familiar with it, and it's probably the closest we will get to a pale lager. Even though, of course, a Kölsch is not a lager; it's a ale, sort of a hybrid. But that's how as far as we will get to that style of a
okay?
pale, very quaffable.
So one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about is I was really struck by the different cans for those first two, the golden and the
Hmm.
IPA. And,
Hmm.
just looking at even what you have on the website around positioning for both of those, I think around the IPA, it seemed like
Hmm.
something that you might enjoy for the evening, whether it's the sole beverage that you're going to have, or maybe you're alternating with
Hmm.
something else. Whereas the golden, I think you mentioned that was drink that for lunch. It could be post
Yeah.
workout, so kind of
Hmm.
pointing out where it fits. But the
Hmm.
design of the packaging or the design of the can, I thought was really interesting to make those different. I mean,
Hmm.
can you talk about your thought process with that? And is that something that will continue
Yeah.
as you add to the portfolio?
Yeah, we will. I mean, the idea is to have these two lines and have extensions within those lines. And we're launching every new beer as part of the Kölsch will be the first beer, what we call the dry run series. So we're trying the beer, and then we'll decide if it fits into the fitness. fitness line or in the fine dining line, which comes in that 12-ounce slim can. But the reason for that really was the idea of creating the drink and the look for the place of consumption versus just, every can looks the same or has all the same feeling, same look. I've launched enough brands over here. I've consulted enough brands on how to do this. I felt it needed to be shaken up because you can spend millions into a brand and nobody will ever really know it. So what's the point of keeping it exactly the same when, you might as well be a little playful. And then very much thinking, I don't want to drink a fitness themed beer at a bar, whether it's alcoholic or not. And when I'm out with friends at a bar and I want to drink a non-alcoholic, I don't need to surf on that one, but I want to have a classy look and feel to it. The 12-ounce slim is unique in the color choices, and we'll have design. The designs will be consistent within those line extensions then.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking you'll always have most likely a 12 ounce as the core size, or are you going to look at 16 ounce or other sizes as well?
Yeah, we filled the 16-ounce hazy today actually.
Oh wow, okay.
So
I wasn't aware of that.
we are expanding into that format as well, where the cost per ounce is a little lower. That's one part of it. But I do like, personally, I do like the 16 ounce for home, and we got feedback to that extent. We have no plans yet on the fitness in 16 ounce, but it's also not impossible that we'll do that in a year or next year at some point. The dry run coach will be in a 12-ounce standard with a paper label, regular label.
And what are your thoughts in terms of distribution? I mean, obviously the NA space is getting a little bit more crowded. It seems like every few months or so there's a handful of new brands coming in, and so
Yeah.
what are you guys focused on in terms of getting the product out there?
I mean, the good thing for us is that through ProofNoMore, we have built-in distribution. We are a pretty well established online website as well. Momentum is outselling almost every other brand on our website at this moment. Of course, we're pushing it the most as well. But yeah, we sold out of our first batch before we even canned the second one. So that's a good sign. And what I've done in my 20 years in the beer industry, it was my job most of the time to build distribution around the country. So I've connections to distributors in every state, talking to some as we speak to help us within those states, within key metro areas to make sure we get into the right locations there. So I very much want to associate myself to the traditional three-tier system, knowing the benefits, knowing how to navigate it. I know what mistakes not to make. There's a lot of people make a lot of mistakes with their pricing, their packaging, with, with a lot of ways, with going with distributors that will not do a good job. And I think I know how to navigate that pretty well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, what states is your beer available in now? Obviously, nationwide with ProofNoMore, but in
Yeah.
terms of local distribution, or is that something you're still working through?
I mean, the good news is we didn't have any large inventory to move through, so there's no level of desperation there. And through Proof No More, we will cover the tri-state area or the New York metro area comfortably. So that is, of course, where we're starting. That's where we're growing the strongest. And then it's really cherry picking and working with some of the distributors, again, that I know, that are hungry for it, that want it, and not shoving it down anybody's throats. So, there'll be distribution in Florida. We're talking to people in Ohio, in Ohio mostly, West Coast, a couple of people that are very interested in it. And then we'll see how that blooms and go from there.
What are your thoughts on sort of the off-premise versus on-premise? I mean, obviously, Proof No More gives you guys a direct channel in the off-premise side, and we seem to be hearing more and more from people around the hospitality side and trying to get into more
Hmm.
bars and restaurants, which obviously takes a lot of effort and
Hmm.
resources to make that happen. Just thinking
Hmm.
about the IPA specifically that you have and
Yeah.
the way that it's packaged, as we were talking about, could be very
Hmm.
attractive to to bars and restaurants to carry. And
Yeah.
just curious how you would see that playing out as far as
Hmm.
your overall strategy for the brand.
Yeah, ProofNoMore is distribution. We've got over 300 accounts on premise alone, and I would say Momentum is in almost 70 on premise accounts in the tri-state or the New York metro area already. And we had to pump the brakes because the last thing I want is to have them run out. Off premise is actually harder for us, aside from some of the typical NA locations that you would go to, like Minus Moonshine and Empire 2 and folks like that. But yeah, convincing more restaurants to take a chance on a more high-end NA option because we're quite a bit more expensive than some of the cheaper competition. I want to name names. But I think it will take a similar path as regular craft beer did as well, where folks are open to pay more for a better tasting product. And yeah, so and whenever we have good discussions with an on-premise beverage director and they do side-by-side comparisons, they will hardly ever say no to our beer. And I want to also point out that we, myself, Alex, Wolfgang, are open to helping other breweries as well to make better NA beers with less equipment needed. Because I do hope that NA beer will become more prevalent and more normal, but definitely have that aspect on quality. And I personally think that there's space for 10 to 50 nationwide NA beer brands that will be able to make a decent living out of it. And then I hope there will be hundreds, if not a few thousand, American craft breweries making NA options for their very local markets too. Yeah, that's what I hope will happen. It cannot be one or two people at the top. That'd be insane to think.
Yeah, I was getting to our next question is, you mentioned in Germany, obviously, and Europe is ahead of us, way ahead of us in terms of NA as a percentage of the overall market. And I know
Hmm.
others have been talking about, can the US or when can the US get to say 10% of the
Hmm.
overall market
Hmm.
being NA, where I believe it already
Hmm.
is in places like Germany. You can correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
but it seems like
yeah.
that's
Spain,
roughly the case. I
Poland,
mean, do you
yeah.
think that's, what do you think the timetable would be for us to get here in the US?
Probably about 5 to 7 years, I could imagine. But again, what athletics doing 300,000 barrels, that's some insane number. Makes them, or puts them within the top 10 of American craft breweries. They're already showing that there is tremendous space right now, and it'll be there. There's having the eyes of Proof No More. We do see a lot of brands coming in struggling after the first couple months or first few years, not being able to find the distribution. Distribution landscape is becoming harder and harder, unfortunately. Online sales is not as pretty as it may sound. If you ship a case from New York to the West Coast and try to make money on it, good luck.
Right.
So, got to really work that out.
Yeah, the next question I wanted to ask you, you mentioned I think you were talking about Germany in terms of local breweries, small little breweries that are doing NA there, and it feels like that's maybe one of the missing pieces here in the U.S. So there's very few at that level who are doing it quite yet. I
Mm.
mean, you've got athletic and the non-alcoholic only breweries out there, and then there's a handful of whatever category you want to put a Sierra Nevada or large craft
Hmm.
brewers who have
Mm.
opened up those lines. But do you think is that sort of the next big opportunity? Do you think for local breweries to get into that, or do you think that might shake out a little differently than it has in Europe?
I think it will be slightly different as in Europe because the craft breweries here are quite a lot smaller than even a small brewery in Germany. A small brewery in Germany puts out 20,000, 30,000 hectoliters. That's considered small. Over here, a small craft brewery could be doing a couple hundred hectoliters a year, or someone to that effect. And so for them to make a non-alcoholic beer for their tap room or for the very local distribution is quite a lot more difficult. But that's where we might be able to help with the recipe that we develop, with the ingredients, and with the process that we are willing to share with other breweries and say, hey, you can brew this on your equipment without renting a de-alc machine, without harsh processes like overly early stop fermentation, or yeah, just which creates super sweet beer, and it's not really anything you want. But our process lends itself to that, and we hope that more breweries will brew that with that. And then you can have small breweries making a couple barrels every time they brew, and they make some of the NA for the local market, or even just for the tap room. Our process allows for the beer to be canned as well, canned and kegged. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And that could be a huge help, I think, to those breweries at that level. I mean, just ones that we talk to in our local area seem to really be struggling with where to get started. They obviously can't make the investment into the equipment and so forth. And they have a little bit of knowledge about the new yeasts and things like that, but they're just not familiar with really how to do it and how to do it on a cost effective basis. So I think partnerships like that could be huge.
No, we're definitely going to be very open with that information and share it, because it's then it's like teaching someone how to bake bread. It's really not that hard, but making really good bread is hard. And then fresh bread is always great, right? So for a local craft brewery to make fresh NA beer is great, but making it so that it stays fresh for 12 months in a can, that's really hard. So that's where we see our edge, and the way that we formulated everything. We know that our beers are going to be great for 12 months in a can. And that's why we're aiming for the possibility of nationwide distribution when it comes to it. And, for anybody else who's going to be super happy making a fun NA beer for the tap room that is like fresh bread. Will be cool.
We love that analogy. We want more of them making some of that good bread.
Sure. Exactly.
Well, Lars, before I let you go, last question for you would just be, obviously you guys are getting ready to launch the Kolsch, top of the Golden and the IPA. Anything else coming down the pipe that you'd be ready to share or want to share with everybody?
I mean, yeah, we have some wild plans. I saw Alex experimenting today with a couple of things that are not yet ready to talk about, but we want to be very inventive in the space. But from a beer style schedule for the rest of the year, we're definitely going to have a fest beer for the September season. Call it Oktoberfest or whatever we'll call it at the end of the day, and we will likely have a Dunkel. So that will be like a lager style Dunkel, and there'll be last quarter of the year. I don't think we'll have anything in the summer. We were hoping to look into a Hefeweizen wheat beer, but we may also skip that and do a single hop variety IPA instead. So 3 beers between now and the end of the year.
We will definitely look forward to seeing those. Especially excited about the fest beer, even though that might be a little ways off. So that'll be exciting. So
it will be again also a lager. So we're definitely dipping our foots into lager territory slowly.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing how that all turns out and staying in touch. And Lars, thanks again for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
So before we go, I again want to thank Lars for taking the time to sit down with us. And by the way, in the time since we initially had the interview, they have launched their Kolsch officially. So you should check that out. You can go to momentumbrew.com to find out more about them, and ProofNoMore.com for more about the e-commerce site, if you're not already familiar with them. We've got some great episodes coming up here in the coming weeks and months. So if you like this content, please make sure to subscribe either at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you happen to be listening to us. We'd also love a review, or if you want to go to our Contact Us page at nationbeer.com and give us any feedback, anything you'd like to hear or are interested in future episodes. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, thanks for listening and cheers.